It's Wolfenstein. It's got guns, armor, mechs, weapons, secret passages, all that stuff, but is that enough to make this a game worth owning? Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Wolfenstein from Arkane Studios. This is the board game adaptation of the video game, otherwise known as Wolfenstein the board game, just in case you got confused by the giant, way too big copy of the video game you just bought. This is Wolfenstein from Arkane Studios, and it's a dungeon crawling experience. It's a dungeon crawling game with 10 missions. Each of us is going to take you through a slow but procedural pathway to eventually kill Hitler, or Mecha-Hitler as it were, as you wander around the board taking actions, using the action economy of each of your characters in order to move, in order to open doors, in order to exchange goods. Well, exchanging goods technically is free, in order to shoot your weapon, and all that stuff as you try to take down the enemies. You'll be dealing with drones, with soldiers, with mechs, with Panzerhounds, with Mecha-Hitler, with all of those things. All of them which will also be attacking you back, all while you navigate the hazard tracker, the round tracker, the stealth, the action economy, all of that. Basic idea of the game is you're going to choose one of the missions. I do recommend playing through them in order, although the later missions do get a little bit more interesting than the first ones, but if you want that procedural pathway, plus it's only 10 missions, if you care that much, you can just jump straight to the second, maybe the third one already, but either way, dive into the game, pick a mission, and then go ahead and select your crew of characters. You'll always be controlling 4 characters when you play this game, whether you play it solo, 2 players, 3 players, whatever it is, always pick 4 characters as you dive into this, and then you're going to start off with their starting gear plus some random equipment draws. Those are going to give you your weapons that you're going to be playing with, and the weapons are going to have a ton of stats on them. Their range, how many extra dice they roll, how much actions it costs to use it, how you can spend ammo on those weapons, because that's a huge part of this game. The idea that you spend your ammo on your weapons, not just to fire, but you'll be expending extra ammo tokens you'll be earning throughout the game as you kill various enemies. You'll be expending those tokens in order to activate the abilities on the weapons. Effectively, the game starts off not that interesting. The amount of things you can do is roll dice and hope for the best. But then as the game progresses, as you kill enemies, you'll earn these various ammo tokens that you'll be using and spending on these actions in order to actually have some degree of agency in the game. That's going to be true for your actions as well, for your own heroes' unique actions, because your heroes have their own special actions you can take that, again, require killing enemy units to get those points so you can actually go ahead and cash them in to do the various things. So the agency starts evolving as you kill people, otherwise it's fairly boring as the game starts off. From there, you have a specific mission you're trying to go for, what you're trying to do, who you're trying to kill, what you're trying to accomplish before you ultimately lose. You have a fixed number of rounds in which you can accomplish that, and you also have this hazard tracker that will tick up every single time you kill an enemy, and also through some events or other opportunities or specific abilities on enemies, but you'll have the hazard tracker slowly ticking up, and you'll have certain things happen when the hazard tracker hits a certain point. So you're being mindful of both how many rounds you have, as well as when things are going to escalate, when the enemies are going to notice your presence in Castle Wolfenstein and try to take you out. Past that, you're just trying to be mindful of what your objectives are, rolling dice when you attack and engage. You're going to be rolling dice, as are the enemies most of the time. The drones, annoyingly enough, tend to just zap you for 2 damage, which is really irritating. But you'll go ahead, you'll be rolling your dice. Armor, that's a terrible roll, but it does feel fairly reminiscent of my actual gameplay experience. You'll be rolling the dice, and whenever you have this armor symbol over here, you'll deal a damage to the enemy, but you have to slowly puncture through their armor in order to take them out. The good news is a single roll of this is enough to hit them directly, bypassing the armor, which, especially in the case of soldats and drones who only have 1 health, that effectively translates into an insta-kill. You bypass their armor, you get a headshot, you take them down, you zap the little battery pack on the back of the drone, whatever happens, you kill them, is what I'm trying to say. Alternatively, larger enemies will acquire more rolls, more frequent opportunities, some of which will have your guns jamming or reloading, as you have to spend 2 action points to reload your weapon, plus not being able to fire your weapon this turn. A bunch of other things you can do, such as pushing yourself, getting a little bit of exhaustion as you push yourself a little too far, getting extra action points, the ability to fire more times in the game. But that's basically what's happening in Wolfenstein the board game. Attack the bad guys, have the bad guys slowly attack you, be mindful of noise. One thing we didn't really touch upon is the idea there is a noise economy when you fire weapons without silencers, or when you have too many models in the same area, you will generate noise that the enemies will slowly hunt you down. The enemies, they're all happy to leave you alone if they don't know you exist, but if they see you, because they see you, or if they know there's noise in an adjacent room, they will try to hunt you down, which gives you a little bit of decision space as far as which hallways to walk down by yourself, with others, when to use silence weapons, or when to go completely BJ Blazkowicz, all out, hands on deck, just shooting all your weapons into the abyss, hoping for the best possible outcome of... It's a slightly margin... That's just as bad as usual. just as bad as my rolls in the game. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Let's go ahead and talk about ease of play, starting off. Rulebook is actually pretty easy. Rulebook has, I wish there were a few more examples of different things. They have a few example pages as far as when you actually go to the main sequencing, but I wish they had more examples as you went to cover things. But the rulebook's mostly clear, just a few more examples would have made it more clear or more certain that my understanding was accurate. There's a few things that are a little bit more effort that you'll have to like double check or reference, but it's really fairly easy to get through, all things considered. I will say the mission book was a little bit confusing because of the fact that the tiles have specific images and the tiles don't matter at all. You'll put stuff on the tiles yourself, the tiles don't matter at all, and the game kind of shows duplicated tiles such that you can't set up the first mission if you're trying to match artwork. The good news is you don't have to match artwork, you just have basic rooms and corridors. That's all that actually matters, and so you can kind of skip that, but there's a little bit of point of confusion as I jumped into that, and it's like, I feel I'm missing tiles. I feel like I don't have the stuff in this game, but I do. It's all fine. The rooms don't matter. So small little point of contention there. Past that, as far as player count, this is a 2 to 4 player game. I have played this at, well, solo. It's actually marked as 2 to 4 players, isn't it? It's technically marked as a 2 to 4 player game, but you could play it solo. You could play this one solo. Diving into yourself, they have a note on it in the rulebook. I wonder if the box says 2 to 4 player. I know online it says 2 to 4 player, but either way, you can dive into this one solo, just controlling all 4 characters. It's a 1 to 4 player game. I have played solo as well as 2 player, and that's basically it. Haven't dived into a 3 or 4. Generally wouldn't want to. I find dungeon crawlers or this kind of genre of game, diving into more players just feels like the action economy is even more distributed. I like these games that's solo and 2 players. As far as solo versus 2 player, both were fine. Controlling 4 characters was fairly easy, not overwhelming. Having 2 players meant you're each controlling 2 characters. You always have 4 characters in the game, regardless of how many people are playing. And you just have, that extra element of team talk as far as going through and trying to engage in how we're going to handle this, or just general having another person at the table. Both worked fine. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off the bat with what I like, the player boards, and this is a small point, but it's still a point. The player boards are absolutely excellent. These boards over here, some of the best I've seen, depending on how you're set up in terms of what you're doing over here. The reason I don't have it set up right now is because they don't do well for the top camera, but I'll keep talking while I put these up over here, the way they're supposed to operate. You're basically going to have all the various things, the various ammo tokens, the extra ammo tokens you're playing with, the various gear, the elements, all that, as well as specific markers for your health and armor over here, little pips that go in there. It's a very nice player board that does an excellent job at conserving table space while being able to hold a ton of stuff. Initially, when the game starts, you can actually put them on the board, and it's fine with your starting gear. As you gather more things, more equipment, this does a great job at both feeling premium, looking nice, as well as actually being very efficient at table space, so I really enjoy those. Past that, the game's fairly simple to dive into. The game is fairly straightforward. I am saying that with the bias of having played a lot of dungeon crawlers, but it kind of has what you expect from a dungeon crawler. You have your action phase, you have your action economy, you have how you attack, how they defend. In this case, they don't. You just hope you roll better. You have the enemy turn activation and how they activate. There's no major surprises as far as the sequencing. There are some aspects you have to go through, the reloading, the exhausting yourself, all those extra elements, but fairly procedural, fairly easy to get started and diving into this game. Past that, the abilities. The players each come with their own abilities. They each come with their own unique way of how they can add value to the team as you take down enemies and as you earn those points to spend on the abilities, and they give you a fun little element of what you're going to try to do. You can try to restrict the hazard tracker. You're going to try to focus the enemies on you. What element? Are you going to go BJ Blazkowicz, guns blazing, shooting 2 weapons at once? There's all these small little elements as far as extra things you can do once you start killing soldiers and earning the economy to then spend on your abilities. Like I said, as I was going through it already, there's no agency at all. Well, not no agency. There's very little agency until you start unlocking those, until you start having the extra element of, now what am I going to do? I'm going to roll dice, I'm going to attack. At which hallway am I going down? Sometimes it's fairly linear, sometimes there are options you can take, but past that, the abilities will give you a little bit more room for actual breath as far as making decisions, making fun decisions as far as how to take advantage of the game. Additionally, and more importantly, I really like the equipment system, the weapon system more specifically, and the way you use ammo in this game. You have ammo tokens that you need to actually shoot the weapon itself, but you don't actually discard the ammo token on its own. You'll be getting ammo tokens from dead soldiers, so you're going to, as slowly as you kill soldiers, be earning ammo tokens, and you spend those ammo tokens on weapon abilities. each weapon, and some weapons are more fun than others, but each weapon comes with different abilities you can utilize as far as how you can discard extra ammo tokens to get extra benefits, making your shots armor piercing, rolling extra dice, any number of different things you can do in the game that gives you a way of, okay, great, I have 3 extra armor tokens. Do I save them for that big bad that we're going to be confronting towards the end of the mission? Or do I try to blow up this hallway of soldiers right now because they're here in front of us, and if we don't take them down, all 3 of them are going to be shooting at us on our turn, and we can't afford to die again because we're running out of revive tokens, and we're going to lose the mission. Some missions, by the way, you can't have anyone die, and others you could. You just have to make your way till the end and still win. But overall, the equipment and ammo system, the weapon and ammo system over here, I found to be a lot more interesting in terms of the decisions you're making. The abilities the characters have are nice, and there are fun times where you feel like you did something cool, but I definitely like the abilities on the weapons a lot more, earning those ammo tokens, choosing where and when to spend them on which abilities at what point. That's where I felt I had the greatest sense of agency and fun moments as I played through Wolfenstein the board game. As far as what I don't like, the hazard tracker doesn't really feel interesting or clever. The hazard tracker gives you a little bit of a timer on the game, and missions are different in this case, so it's not necessarily true across the board, but the hazard tracker just gives an element of timing. You have more enemies spawning, you have something happening, and you know exactly when it's happening, and you often are going to have to kill guards that are in your way, so this aspect of, do I hold back on killing guards, isn't really present. It's more just a timer on the mission, which I don't mind that. It's just, it didn't feel like I had a lot of choice as far as what I'm going to do in terms of dealing with the hazard tracker. I have to kill enemies eventually. Eventually the thing is going to move and progress. There are some characters that have some ability to restrict it, but not enough to the point that you need to actually take down the baddies. And so I found the hazard tracker acted as more of a timer than an interesting decision point. It's fine, it just doesn't feel clever. The noise and stealth in the game. This game has an element of, as you move to rooms and as you take shots, or as you have multiple models in a room, multiple hero models with if you have any hero with any other model, hero or enemy, you add noise. There's just too much stuff going on, which is fine, and it adds a restriction, similar to the way the hazard tracker adds a restriction without adding tactical agency. I didn't feel the noise added much to my decision space. Okay, great. I have to be mindful of the fact that when I move to a room, it'll cause noise. But the enemies aren't really patrolling. I don't really have ways to draw them out or do anything interesting with it. I don't really use it as an element to in any way change the way I play the game. It's just something I have to be mindful of. It does restrict what I can do or how frequently I'll do it. It does restrict my turns of, hey, you know what? I'll stay a room behind and I'll move forward next turn because I don't want them coming out and shooting us this turn. So it definitely affected how I played, but it didn't make me feel like I had interesting choices. Again, both the hazard tracker and the stealth impact the game. They just feel like elements that I feel I wanted them to give me interesting decisions and didn't. They just impacted the game without giving me any agency or choice. This whole stealth aspect doesn't really add value to the experience for me. It's just something that's there. And there's no sense of surprise or adventure. Going back to the hazard track and the way things play out, you kind of have all the models on the board. You know when new models will enter the board. There's no sense of like what's going to happen in this game. I mean, you roll your dice and you hopefully hit. That sense of adventure, and let's try this again. Let's see if I can actually roll better this time. That's actually decent. That's a decent roll. But as past the randomness of the rolls, there's not really a sense of what's going to happen. There are events. There are event cards you can go through as you deal with different event tokens. There's going to be specific tokens you can go to and then take a search action basically and draw an event card and have a degree of what's happening, some text, a choice involved. So that sense of unknown, sure, but that sense of unknown doesn't really impact the larger state. For the most part, you're not really spawning things. You just kind of have an impact as far as what you get, whether you advance the hazard tracker or not, or the round tracker, things like that. There's not really a sense of exploration or adventure. You have the mission, it's all set up, and then you just go through the process from start to finish. And mostly all these things kind of wrap up to my main real complaint here, which is I didn't feel the largest sense of agency when playing through Wolfenstein. There are decisions to be made. Make no mistake, there are decisions. There are times we have branching pathways. There's times we have secret passageways, and you're going from here to there, and you're choosing to bypass the room. That room has a more difficult enemy unit. That room, on the other hand, has more models, so you might advance the hazard tracker a bit faster. But there's very little sense of agency. Most of my agency came down to those tokens, to those ammo and the tokens, in the sense that when I'm shooting my weapons, when do I want to use those tokens to my advantage versus saving the ammunition for later instead. That's often when I felt the greatest sense of agency. That and my character abilities as well, as far as when do I use them, when do I not, when do I insta-kill that guard, when do I cause that guard to focus on me because I have a little bit more health and we can't afford to lose her right now. There are decisions to be made. I'm not saying there aren't. But the core gameplay loop for the most part is move, shoot, move, shoot, move, shoot, have the enemy shoot back without a lot of nuance around it. Granted, I'll be very clear, anyone can say this about any dungeon crawler they play because some people will see that agency and others won't. There are many dungeon crawler games that I see it a lot more. I see it in Wolfenstein. not as much as I would like to. As far as I can see others not liking, few small things. First of all, there's lots of text in this game. There's text in the cards, the enemies, the allies, the equipment, all the things, the weapons you're firing, lots and lots of small text. So this is a game where you can learn the game fairly easily, but then you kind of have to read like 14 different cards of information. What do my heroes do? What do the weapons do? What do the enemies do? That first game can be a bit overwhelming. It does get better as you get familiar with the types of units. The drones activate this way, the soldats do that, the super soldat, we should be mindful because we can't puncture through his armor, it's always present. There's all these small little rules and nuances, but as you dive into a bit more, it becomes easier to absorb. But that first game is really rules, and then tons of information overload as you read through a lot of things. Once you get past that first game, it gets significantly easier. Obviously, there's lots of luck in the genre. That's, again, appropriate for the genre in general. Dungeon crawlers, rolling dice, shooting weapons, lots of, like, randomness as far as, you know, the event cards you draw, the weapons you get, the equipment you get, the dice you roll, the dice the enemy roll, all that. Lots of randomness, but again, very appropriate for the genre. And then lastly, I'll say the events. The events, I didn't mind them, but they can feel a bit out of place, giving you thematic choices that don't make sense for what's happening in the hallway. You kill the last guard, and then you have some sort of guard approach you in the hallway and give you a choice or something going on. Thematically off, they just give you a little bit of a choose-your-own adventure when you go through the event deck over here. As far as final thoughts on Wolfenstein, I like Wolfenstein. I do. It just doesn't do anything new for me past the ammunition. The game is fine. The game gives you that pathway forward. It gives you a bunch of, you know, running through a dungeon, shooting enemies. It has a theme that I enjoy. I've always enjoyed the video game, the original and the subsequent one. It's a good game. I just feel it doesn't necessarily innovate within the genre. If someone's saying, if you're a Wolfenstein fan and you're saying, hey, should I get this game? I really like Wolfenstein, I want to play the game. I'd probably say go for it. I'd say I have some other games I'd probably recommend first, but go for this one if you like the theme. It does a good job. For me, it just doesn't do that much that's innovative past the ammunition. And I'm sure other games have done ammunition or the way they use them for different abilities. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I've definitely played games that have an ammo system in place, but this uses the ammo almost as what you need to fire the weapon, but also what you need to activate the abilities. It's a little bit of a twist, especially if you choose to give up your last ammo to try to really push for something, but then you're left with not being able to fire that gun anymore. So there are trade-offs there. It's an interesting decision space around the ammunition. I just don't know if, for me, that's enough to carry the game on its own. It's a good game. It does things well. It follows a fairly scripted pathway, is a little bit lower on the agency side, which could be a good thing, especially if you're diving into board games for the first time, especially if you're a video gamer and this is your entry point into this kind of game. That little bit of lack of agency might make this more appealing, more able to dive into it, giving you enough decision space to be welcoming without overwhelming. I think Wolfenstein's a fine game. I just don't know if it does anything amazing for me. For me, this one's a 3.5 out of 5. It hits all the right notes for a dungeon crawler. It doesn't do that much that's that innovative, and the agency is a little on the low end, while the weapon system and ability system, or specifically the ammunition system more so than the rest, I really enjoyed that element of the gameplay. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Reichbusters. If you're looking for something that is going to give you that World War II theme with a little bit of zombie stuff thrown in, Reichbusters from MachineGames is another game that has another degree of stealth system, very different implementation, a little harder to dive into, but I think it gives you a little bit more of a reward once you do. And then there's Zombicide. Zombicide is often my go-to if you just want to run and gun with a lot more cavalierness without worrying about stealth or noise or enemies. You might get slaughtered if you don't worry about it at all, but you don't have to worry about it quite as much as you try to tackle the hordes of zombies in front of you. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.